I'm popping in here rather reluctantly. I've been writing about coronavirus for about 3 months now, and sometimes it seems like I write about nothing else but coronavirus. At this point, I feel like I'm either repeating myself or even worse, that I'm leaving out something critical every time I talk about this. But there's so much bullshit circulating around out there on different sites and on social media that I felt like I needed to come in and talk to it one more time. First off, don't panic, because that never helps anything, but do try very, very hard not to come down with COVID-19, especially right now. Do this for your sake, but for the sake of your family, for your friends, and for people you don't even know. Let me give a quick example. Right now in Germany, about 0.35% of people that catch COVID-19 are dying. Now, that sounds like a pretty small number. It's still many times greater than the seasonal flu, but it's very good compared to some other countries, because right next door in Italy, 10% of people are dying. Why is there that difference? Well, in Germany, they have about 8 hospital beds for every 1,000 people in the country. And on an average day, about 80% of those beds are occupied, so about a bed and a half are sitting empty on any given day in Germany for every 1,000 people out there. In Italy, there are about 3 beds for every 1,000 people, and also about 80% of those beds are occupied. So on any given day in Italy, only about half of one bed is available for 1,000 people. Okay, right now in Germany, there are only about 0.3 people per 1,000 of the population that have come down with COVID-19. So still plenty of space between the beds available and the number of cases in Germany. And so everybody in Germany is getting good treatment. If they need a respirator, they're getting a respirator. Need a hospital bed, they're getting a hospital bed. And as a result, the case fatality rate, the number of people who die over the number of cases, is about 0.35%. But in Italy, about 1 person in 1,000 right now has COVID-19. And again, that seems pretty small. 1/10 of 1% of the population. But remember, 1 person in 1,000 now has it, but there are only half of a hospital bed per 1,000 people in Italy available. And so what's happening right now in Italy is you've got people that are sick that don't have hospital beds. And you've got people with COVID-19 that are competing with people that have been in car accidents, or people that have had heart attacks, or people that have had strokes for those available hospital beds. So right now in Italy, doctors are being forced to triage the available hospital beds. They're looking at potential life weeks available to people and trying to weigh who gets a bed. That's a terrible position for the doctors to be put in. And every new case of COVID-19 that comes through their door only makes it worse. They have to keep lowering the standard to get that bed. So in Italy, the number of deaths is sloping upward toward the number of people that need critical care. And the number of people that need critical care with COVID-19 is between 15 and 20%. So right now in Italy, about 10% of people are dying when they come down with COVID-19 because about half the people that need critical care can't get it. In the United States, we have a little less than 3 hospital beds per people. It's actually about 2.75 hospital beds per 1,000 people. But our occupancy rate is a little lower, about 65%. So what ends up happening is that we have about 1 open hospital bed for every 1,000 people in the U.S. Also right now in the U.S., about 0.2 people per 1,000 have COVID-19. So right now in the United States, as a whole, there's still a bit of a buffer between the beds that are available and the beds that are demanded by COVID-19. But in regional areas, in New York, California, in Washington, increasingly in places like Florida and Texas and Michigan, that's becoming not true. There's enough demand for beds in those local areas that we're starting to stress those local and regional hospital networks. It doesn't have to get all the way to one person in 1,000 before the national network is stressed, because just like in Italy, just like elsewhere, hospital beds and cases aren't distributed evenly. We've got lots of rural areas in the United States where there are no hospital beds. We'll have some places where there are plenty of hospital beds, but we're going to have way too many places where there are simply not enough hospital beds. And then doctors in the United States are going to be forced to do the same kind of horrible decisions as doctors in Italy. So don't catch it. Don't be one of those people contributing it. Don't be part of the lottery to find a hospital bed when this thing is at its peak. And don't be the person that, because you've got COVID-19, you displace that person that's having a heart attack or having a stroke or has been in a car accident or any other reason needs that critical care and finds the critical care not available because someone's in that bed with COVID-19. The number of deaths that are being reported directly attributable to COVID-19 is only a fraction of the deaths that are really being generated because the hospital systems are getting overrun. That only says the same thing I was saying right at the start. Try very, very hard not to catch this right now. At least try not to catch it in this first wave. We're not doing nearly enough at this point to really generate the kind of social distancing that's necessary to prevent the growth of this virus, to prevent new infections from occurring. This is a highly contagious disease. No one has immunity unless they're one of those few people that has already caught it and recovered. And there's no vaccine available. And no matter what you've heard at this point, we don't know of any effective treatment. So stay inside, wash your hands, all of the things that you've been told. Just don't catch it. A couple of other points real quickly, good and bad. The virus is mutating. You've heard that by now. It's an RNA virus. That's what they do. They mutate quite rapidly and frequently. In fact, pretty much mutate every time they reproduce. But the early stories that you probably heard about how there's 2 strains of this, and there was a tough strain in China, and there's an easier strain going around the world, it's bullshit. 1, it wasn't a great paper to begin with, and 2, it's been misreported almost everywhere by people that didn't understand what the paper said. There are no really 2 separate strains of this. There are dozens of variations of this, but right now we don't have any information that says any of those variations are any worse or better than any other, and that's the bad news. The good news is those variations are slight enough that we also don't have any indication that if you catch this and make it through, you won't have immunity going forward. I know by now you've probably heard stories of people that got reinfected, but there's no reason to think that most of those are not really just problems with testing. This is a coronavirus. Other coronaviruses give people immunity for periods of weeks or months or years following infection. There's no reason to think that COVID-19 is not the same. You catch it, you get sick. If you're one of the people that's lucky enough to get through it, when you come out the other side, you have immunity and you won't catch it again until there is a significant mutation, which hasn't happened yet. The other good news out of that is it means that vaccines are likely to be possible. If this virus was really mutating the way people say, where there are already 2 strains and strains popping up everywhere, there would be almost no point in trying to make a vaccine because the vaccine would be useless as soon as you made it. But that's not the case. It's really not mutating so severely, so quickly, that we can't make an effective vaccine. We can make vaccines for other things. We can make vaccines for this too. And vaccines are underway. It's just going to be a year or so before they're out there in the quantities to be used. One last thing. There is no pool out there of tens of millions of people that have had this thing and didn't even know it. Yeah, I know that rumor goes around, and I know that you've probably been told by people that, gee, I had this cough a month ago, and that was probably the coronavirus. No, sorry, more bullshit. Because we've done testing in some areas, in areas like Singapore, in South Korea, a whole village in Italy. People have gone through and looked at large sections of the population, and we know for sure that there's not millions of cases being missed out there. Not at this point. we know that about 80% of people are going to have what has been described as a mild case. But understand, when people say mild case, they include what it feels like to get a bad flu, which is, kick your ass. A bad flu is bad. It's going to put you down for weeks, and recovery from coronavirus can take about 6 weeks. So don't catch it. It's bad in the first place. It's going to make you sick, and you're going to be quite sick. But some people are lucky enough to skate by with really mild symptoms, more cold-like symptoms, and that's about half of people. But there's not millions more people going around out there that don't even know they had it. That's not the case. So that would be happy in the sense that, one, it would be building up a bigger pool of people that were already immune and bringing us closer to that herd immunity. It would also mean that the case fatality rate was much lower than we think, but sorry, it's not true. Okay, so now go wash your hands again, and honestly, I don't know if wearing a mask helps. At this point, I have gotten so many conflicting answers from Harvard to Hong Kong on whether or not it's a good thing on wearing a mask. I can't tell you. But if it makes you feel better and you're not using a mask that could be used at a hospital, go ahead. But if you've got a stock of masks in your back room that really should be available at your nearby ER, please give it to them. They're going to need it. Thanks.